What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So now that 14 out of the playoff spots are all but locked up, besides the third Metro spot and the last wild card in the East, I thought it'd be a fun idea to go through every single team and kind of shed some light on every single team's unsung hero. What I mean by unsung hero, a guy that's not getting enough shine as he should be, despite being a pretty big reason as to why his team has been so successful this season, whether it be throughout the season, whether it be like a month or two long stretch where they played fantastic when people were injured. We're going to be looking at every single team's unsung heroes, all 14 teams that are going to be in the playoffs. And up first, we're going to start with the New York Rangers. It's Jonathan Quick. When looking at Jonathan Quick, he really helped carry the Rangers up until like early February. When looking up until February 7th, Quick had a 12-4-2 record with a .919 save percentage. You look at Igor Shesterkin, he only had a 19-12-1 record with an .899. So although the Rangers would still be in the playoffs if they had a below average backup goalie, they might be second in the Metro right now. They definitely wouldn't be first in the entire NHL right now if Jonathan Quick wasn't so great outside of the gate, while Igor Shesterkin, let's just call it what it was pretty bad, just straight up pretty bad for the first 2 to 3 months of the season. Jonathan Quick has been massive for the New York Rangers, and although Igor Shesterkin's definitely the guy heading into the playoffs, if something happens to Igor Shesterkin, if he plays bad, if he, God forbid, gets hurt, Jonathan Quick is not that much of a downgrade based on how he's looked this season, and considering the playoff success that he has obviously had. Jonathan Quick, massive unsung hero. The Vegas Golden Knights, William Carlson. Marchessault's kind of getting a lot of the shine, and rightfully so. He scored 40 goals, having an absolutely insane season. But when looking at William Carlson, he has been so fantastic for the Vegas Golden Knights. He did miss 10 games, but he has 26 goals, 27 assists for 53 points in 63 games. He was on pace, if he was fully healthy this season, to go for like 35 and 35, while also being one of the best defensive centers in the entire NHL, lines up against the opposing team's number one center. So when looking at him, he has been great for the Vegas Golden Knights, who have obviously had even longer injuries than he's been out. Mark Stone hasn't played since late January. Jack Eichel missed 10, 15 games. Theodore missed some games. So when looking at William Carlson this season, he has been fantastic for them, and a major reason why. If William Carlson hadn't stepped up to the plate, they might still be fighting for a goddamn wild card spot with the St. Louis Blues, but he's been money for them this season. The Carolina Hurricanes, Brady Shay, obviously in a massive contract year, and he's playing some of the best hockey of his entire career. He's leading the Carolina Hurricanes defense corps in points right now, 10 goals, 33 assists for 43 points. He has more points than Brett Burns. You can make a stronger, I think Slavin's definitely the best defenseman on the Carolina Hurricanes, but you can make a strong argument that this season Brady Shay has probably been maybe the number 2 defenseman on the Carolina Hurricanes. And when looking at him, he's playing a solid 21, 30 a night, just fantastic two-way game. He's pretty underrated defensively, and as a result, him rising to the occasion, Carolina potentially having the best 3-pack of defensemen in the entire NHL. They probably have the best defense core overall in the entire NHL, because of Shay's obviously elevated play in this contract year. He's been great for them. The Tampa Bay Lightning, Nick Paul. When looking at Nick Paul, he needed to step up this season. They obviously lost Alex Killorn in free agency. They've been losing guys over the last 2 to 3 years, basically every single free agency. So he went from 15 minutes a night to 17 minutes a night. Best offensive year of his entire career, 21 goals, 20 assists for 42 points. Basically, he's actually outproducing Chiarelli offensively, as well as having fantastic defensive numbers. 2.38 expected goals per 60, which ranks 44th out of the 169 players that have at least 900 5-on-5 minutes. So he has been that ideal third-line center. One of the best third-line centers in the entire NHL. Can give you around 25 goals, 22 assists. That's fantastic for the Tampa Bay Lightning, because although Chiarelli isn't a high-end second-line center, they basically have 2 very good low-end second-line centers that they can kind of rotate, and as a result, they're still very weak in their bottom 6, but having a guy like Nick Paul as that third-line center, it does inspire more faith, especially as a two-way guy, that they can maybe go on a deep run, and he can potentially shut down some other teams' second lines or something like that. The Florida Panthers, Gustav Forsling. When looking at this guy the first month of the season, he had to carry for the most part. It was him and like OEL. Forsling was playing 24 minutes a night, and the Cats still went 10-5-1. They didn't really miss a beat without Ekblad and Montour to start the first month. He was amazing. And then since then, him and Ekblad have been arguably the best pair in the entire NHL. I would say, I'm going to mention someone else that probably has been a better pair. But when looking at it, out of the 69 pairs in the entire NHL, they're tied with McAvoy and Grzelcyk in terms of goals percentage percentage at 66.6%. They've outscored opponents 28-14, as well as having the third best expected goals percentage at 58.9. And just on the whole, Forsling has 35 points in 74 games. I know plus minus isn't like the best stat. I don't use it in most circumstances, but he is the plus minus leader in the entire NHL at 48. That is pretty impressive when looking at that. And as a result, he obviously signed a pretty massive 8-year, $5.75 million contract for a guy that was on waivers 3 years ago. It is crazy how far he's came, and I think he's kind of been the unsung hero of this Florida Panthers team. When you look at like Sam Reinhart is obviously, and Bobrovsky have got more of the shine. I think Forsling has been absolutely fantastic for them. The Nashville Predators, Ryan McDonagh. When looking at McDonagh last year, it didn't look like the end, but it looked like a sharp decline. He had 20 points. His defensive numbers kind of fell off for the most part. He's been very good this year. He's not an offensive beast by any means, but he has 29 points, and all but 4 of those have been even strength points. He's 36th out of all NHL defensemen in terms of even strength points with 25. And when looking at it, he's really bounced back this season and been that number 2 defenseman that the Nashville Predators were kind of lacking. It was really Yossi just carrying last year, but McDonagh has been able to play around 22 minutes a night and just fantastic two-way hockey. So it looks like at 34 years old, I don't think he can play for another 4 or 5 years, but he has a couple more good years left in the tank. Ryan McDonagh has been very impressive for a Nashville Predators team that not a ton of people expected to be that successful. Sticking with defensemen for the Edmonton Oilers, Mattias Ekholm. Yes, the shine has gone to Evan Bouchard, and I agree, Evan Bouchard should be the one getting Norris votes out of the pair. They've been the best pair in the entire NHL, and Ekholm is a massive reason why. He has been so good defensively, especially, and offensively as well. 41 points in 72 games. 37 of those have been even strength points, which is 12th in the entire NHL. And as mentioned when talking about the Forsling and Ekblad pair, they're the number 1 team in terms of analytically the best pair in the entire NHL with 63.4% expected goals percentage, 4% higher than any other pair. So in looking at it, the Edmonton Oilers now have that number 1 offensive defenseman in Evan Bouchard, as well as that number 2 very good two-way guy in Ekholm. He was with that last year, but a full season getting acclimated to the Edmonton Oilers. He has been fantastic for the Oilers and a major reason why they were able to turn around the season after starting out so goddamn poor. Next up, the Winnipeg Jets, and I'm going to go with another goalie. I'm going to go with Laurent Brossoit. I think I pronounced that right. When looking at him, he's actually been better than Connor Hellebuyck on a per game basis. Obviously, doesn't have the same workload, but he has a .925 save percentage, 2.1 goals against, a 13-5-2 record. In 20 games, he has 10.4 goals saved above expected. Absolutely insane in a backup role this season. Him and Stolarz have probably been the best backups in the entire NHL. And when looking at it last year, the Jets were a wild card team, in part because their backup goaltending was pretty poor. It was David Rittich. He had a 9-8-1 record with only a 9-0-2. And yes, the Jets haven't been playing their best hockey of late, but they're going to be in a division spot instead of play a division, or they're going to be in a division third spot instead of obviously play a division winner like they did last year and just got blown out against Vegas. So Brossoit has been a massive reason why the Winnipeg Jets are going to finish north of 100 points. And although I might not pick them in the first round, they're going to have a far more favorable matchup because he's been so good in net for them. When looking at the Boston Bruins, I think there's two guys that you can go with. It's obviously Coyle or Pavel Zacha. They basically split like kind of they're like a 1.5 center instead of like a number 1 center, number 2 center. They're both have been very good. They're going to be on pace for around 60 points. They had to obviously answer the bell with Patrice Bergeron retiring, and I think they have been very good. If I had to choose one, I'd probably go with Charlie Coyle. He has like 5 more goals. So Charlie Coyle, very much an unsung hero. The LA Kings, Philip Deneau. When looking at it, obviously the first line gets most of the shine. Kempe, Kopitar, Byfield. Deneau is just Mr. Reliable in terms of giving you around 50 points. Selke level defense most seasons. He's doing it again. Not the most flashy player. Never really gets the respect that he deserves, but just one of the better two-way centers in the two-way second line centers in the entire NHL. When looking at the Toronto Maple Leafs, going a little bit off the board, I'm going with Martin Jones. Yes, Martin Jones. He hasn't really played that much recently, but when looking at Martin Jones, once Joseph Woll went down and Samsonov started to plunge, Joseph Woll provided much-needed stability to that goaltending room. From December 7th to January 11th, he went 8-3-1 with a .929 save percentage. So yeah, he hasn't played a ton of games, but that stretch was massive for the Leafs. They were getting the worst goaltending in the entire league when Samsonov was starting. So without that little stretch, they're probably in the wild card 2 spot. Tampa's probably in that 3rd divisional spot, especially with what has happened of late. So in looking at Martin Jones, not saying the Leafs are in the playoffs because of Martin Jones, but that little spurt for a month was absolutely massive in terms of keeping the Leafs as a winning team and safely in a divisional spot instead of battling for a wild card spot and then having to play like Boston, who they dread playing, or the New York Rangers in the first round. That was very big for them in terms of their divisional seeding. Dallas Stars, Mason Marchman. When looking at it, I feel like everybody's getting shine on the Dallas Stars. Thomas Hartley's breaking out. Heiskanen solidifying himself as probably like a top 5 defenseman in the entire NHL. The first line obviously gets their flowers. Third line, Stankoven, Johnston. People freaking love them. The second line, it's more so about Sagan's resurgence and Duchesne being such a great free agency signing that I think Mason Marchman is kind of getting underlooked. When looking at Marchman, last season, 31 points in 68 games in his first year of his $4.5 million deal over 4 years. Wasn't looking like a good contract. It's obviously not worth it, but he has really had a bounce back season and is looking like the Mason Marchman from 2 years ago. He has 20 goals, 31 assists, 51 points in 72 games. So I'm really impressed with Mason Marchman, how he has been able to produce at a high level. And as a result of his high level play, Dallas has one of the best second lines in the entire NHL and just overall one of the deepest forward cores in the entire NHL. The Vancouver Canucks, when looking at the Vancouver Canucks, I think that it has to be Nils Hoglander, similar to the Dallas Stars. Everybody's getting love for the most part, like obviously Quinn Hughes, JT Miller, Besser, Pettersson, Demko. But when looking at Hoglander, I think Canucks fans have been hyping up, but I don't think people realize how effective he has been at 5-on-5. This guy sees almost no power play time, and he has 22 goals, which is 23 goals at 5-on-5, which is tied for the 9th most in the entire NHL, ahead of Rantanen, Kucherov, Crosby, Nylander, McDavid, Kaprizov, just to name a few. Again, there's only 8 guys ahead of him. So in looking at him, considering the prior 2 years, he had 27 points in 85 games. His NHL future, I still had an NHL future, but it was looking shaky considering he had a very good rookie year. But he has really re-solidified himself as a top 6 forward going forward, as well as having a very impressive 2.24 expected goals against per 60. He's really rounded himself out as a sniper, as well as a pretty reliable defensive player. I have been very impressed with him. And then lastly, for the Colorado Avalanche, we have Ross Colton. They're obviously so front-loaded. I didn't want to pick any. They have some depth now, obviously, at the deadline, but I didn't want to pick any like the top dogs, and Etrushkin only played 48 games. So I decided to go with Ross Colton. He has 36 points in 74 games, which doesn't seem that impressive, but he was a very good deal. They brought him in for the early second or late first-round pick with Tampa Bay. So in looking at it, I think he's fit very well into their middle 6, and as a result, they are much more of a deeper team considering some of the moves that they made. I think Ross Colton has fit in very nicely with the Colorado Avalanche and kind of has been an unsung hero that I have not heard really anybody talk about. So yeah, let me know in the comments, what do you think about these picks? Who else do you think has been a massively unsung hero this season and been a part of their team's success to a certain degree? And I'll be seeing you in the next one.